believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Jeremy Ryan Slate, and I also have a phenomenal 3-hour discussion with a returning guest talking about fasting, water, keto, paleo, longevity, all the lies we've been told by Big Pharma, Big Food, and much more. So keep a lookout for that 3-hour conversation, which should be out soon after this one is released. But on today's show, we have Jeremy Ryan Slate. Like I mentioned, he's a podcast host who has interviewed tons of amazing guests like James, Lindsay, General Flynn, Adam Curry, Danush D'Souza, Dave Rubin, Hall of Fame baseball player Johnny Damon, and many more. He's also the CEO and founder of the company called Command Your Brand. He's the author of Unremarkable to Extraordinary, and he's also a historian who's been interviewed on tons of great shows like Tim Pool's The Culture War. But before we get into this fun and fascinating conversation with Jeremy, let me remind you this is a value for value show. If you get any value out of the discussions and conversations I bring to you on a just about weekly basis, please consider giving some value back. Of course, you can rate, review, subscribe to the show, leave comments on whatever platform you're watching or listening to the Ripple Effect Podcast. But if you can't financially support the show, and I'm sure most of you can afford as little as $1 a month, join us on Patreon and support us. And it's one of the best ways of supporting a show you enjoy because it's the only money that is guaranteed every month, and I can look forward to that little bit of income to help pay for the bandwidth and all the other expenses that come with running a website and running a podcast. Like I always say, if a small percentage of people who watch and listen to the Ripple Effect Podcast donated as little as $1 a month, I could easily do the show full time. And many of us go to a gas station or go to a coffee place and spend much more on a couple snacks or a cup of coffee that brings you very little value. So hopefully this show is as valuable to you as that cup of coffee, and you can donate as little as $1 a month. You can also send a one-time donation to our Venmo account or PayPal account. You can send crypto to our crypto wallet. And if by any chance you want to send a message that you want publicly read or shared on the intro or on the podcast, please let me know. I've received a lot of one-time donations with messages the last couple years, and I never know if it's okay to give you the shout out if you want your name out there or whatnot. So if anyone who's sending a one-time donation wants a shout out on the show, just let me know in a message and I will definitely do that for you. We also have a merch store. If you want to represent the Ripple Effect Podcast with some mugs, t-shirts, tank tops, kids' clothes, whatever it may be, whatever you might be looking for, check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. Please browse around all the logos and colors and merch, and hopefully you can find something you like and support the show. And then I also have a couple sponsors, one being Content Safe. Content Safe runs my website, but they also sync all my video channels together. So the reason you can find Ripple Effect Podcast on so many video platforms like BitChute, Minds, Rockfin, Rumble, and many others is because Content Safe lets me upload the information, the thumbnail, the description, the video to one platform. Then magically soon after, you can find that same video, thumbnail, description on all the video platforms I'm on. So he saves me tons of time. And when I say he, I'm referring to Matt, the founder of Content Safe, who is a regular on this show and a regular on the Union of the Unwanted. So if you're a podcaster, streamer, host of any show whatsoever, some type of content creator, and you want your videos on all the major video platforms, but you don't have time to upload each video to each channel, hit up Matt from Content Safe. Let him know you're a listener of the Ripple Effect podcast, and he'll definitely hook you up and take care of you. The next sponsor is the University of Reason, created by my dear friend Richard Grove, another past guest of this show and a regular on the Union of the Unwanted. He's also a historian, documentary filmmaker, host of the Grand Theft World podcast, just to name a few things on his resume. But he started the University of Reason and these very popular autonomy courses. If you're at a crossroads in life, you're looking to do something different, if you're looking to expand on some skills you have, maybe learn some new skills, maybe just connect with a freedom-minded, libertarian-minded community, please check out the University of Reason. Use the link in the show description or on my website, and hopefully you can help yourself and the Ripple Effect podcast at the same time. But please use the links in the show description or on my website when checking out any of these sponsors. The next one is Element Electrolytes, which is a electrolyte powder mix you put in your water, and it keeps you hydrated. It has no artificial colors, no artificial flavors, has the dosages you need to really optimize your body and mind to prevent you from cramping, help with migraines, muscle fatigue, mental fatigue, and many other symptoms due to dehydration. Please check out Element Electrolytes. It might be the product for you. It tastes amazing. It won't kick you out of ketosis, won't kick you out of fasting if you're doing those type of diets. It was formulated and created by OG in the health and nutrition community. His name is Rob Wolf. He's also a past guest on the show and a regular on many other amazing shows like Joe Rogan. Rob Wolf is also a best-selling author, documentary filmmaker, jiu-jitsu black belt. He's opened one of the first CrossFit gyms in the U.S. He's also done bodybuilding in the past. But throughout the years of being in the health and nutrition community, he's helped a lot of professional athletes. He's helped a lot of people with health issues and diet issues. And one thing that people were missing were the right amount of electrolytes to really optimize their body and mind. And he created a product that tastes amazing and will actually work in regards to keeping you hydrated. There's a lot of options out there. A lot of them have artificial sweeteners like sucralose. This is sweetened with the stevia leaf. A lot of them also look like they have the same electrolytes, but they don't have the right dosages. Most of what we sweat out is sodium. So that is the secret element that really needs to be added to your body. Drinking water will help you get moisture and fluids into your body, but to really get it from your veins to your muscles, to your cells, to your tissue, you need electrolytes and enough of them. There's a reason why sodium is an essential mineral. There's a lot of stuff that's not essential that you don't need, but sodium has been demonized throughout the years, but really is an important essential mineral to really keep us healthy, keep us happy, and keep us going. That's it, guys. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Jeremy Ryan Slate, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
Master's degree is actually in the Roman Empire, so that's what I went to school for. And then after I got out of grad school, I actually ended up teaching in a Catholic high school for a couple of years, and they had just gotten rid of like number grades and stuff like that, so it got a little out of control, and I burned out like super quick. And I was like, all right, I got to figure something else out, because in 2012, my mom had a bad stroke, so it made me look at like, do I really want this job? Do I really want to do what I'm doing? So I tried a lot of different things. I, did online marketing. I did network marketing. Network marketing, I feel like, made me a horrible person for a little bit. I did insurance sales. Like, I tried a lot of different things because like I kind of felt like I couldn't be tied down to like working for somebody else anymore. And I actually ended up working at a friend's marketing agency just to kind of like pay the bills back in like 2014. Started a podcast as a hobby. It absolutely took off. We had 10,000 listens in our first month, with me being like absolutely nobody. And people started asking for help. So in 2016, I started an agency called Command Your Brand. And since then, we've, placed our clients on, I think, close to 10,000 podcasts since that time. And, we've just been trying to do the best job we can. And, in terms of like how that podcast has developed over the years, when I started, it was kind of more about like, wanting to learn how to create my own life and like do something different. And, it was very like personal development-y. And it's never 100% matched with me, because like, I'm one of those people that like you watch like a keynote speaker and I'm like, oh, that guy's full of shit. So like I'm not like very personal development-y. And I guess like as kind of the world changed a lot through like 2019 and 2020, I started talking about a lot more things that I care about. So we've really went deep into what happened, during the COVID pandemic. We talk a lot more about things like election fraud. We talk a lot more about things like what's in our food. And so I've really dove into what matters more to me, and that's what I do day to day now, man.
So you obviously were fascinated with the Roman Empire and that part of history.
Yeah.
Listened to you on the Culture War. That was a great podcast with
Oh,
us.
thank you.
And what?
Do I come off as on the spectrum when I'm like giving dates like that? Because people tell me I do.
No, no. I mean, obviously,
242 toothpicks, Rain Man.
you just are very knowledgeable, and you probably have to listen to a podcast like that probably 8 times before you can process all the information. But it's fascinating, and I love that. I mean, I've had people on like in the past like that, like Dominic D'Agostino with the keto diet. He'll just kind of study after study, or like Dr. Peter McCullough. It's like it's so much
Hmm.
information that if you're not familiar with this stuff, like you kind of it takes you a little bit longer to process it, and then you have to kind of re-listen to it. But if you're familiar with it, then I'm sure that if somebody else who is a scholar or a big into that historical time, that they'll listen to it and be like, yeah, that's I remember that. Yeah, that's
Well,
important.
you know what's interesting about that though too? Like history people are rough. Like I don't know how else to explain this. Like history people are rough because we're all really good at making you think our opinion was what actually happened. So then we just fight amongst ourselves about who's wrong and who's right. And like, you mentioned the culture war episode. I had a lot of fun in the comments of that one because like I was going back and forth with a few people. I just eventually go to one guy. I'm like, dude, like your opinion isn't what actually happened. He goes, sure, but I'm right. I'm like, how do we know that? Nobody knows that you're right. So it's like history is a really interesting thing because it's also perspective.
Yeah, without a doubt. I remember having Professor Michael Millerman on. He's kind of famous for being the first person to translate Alexander Dugin's books into English, and really fascinating philosopher and whatnot. But that's one thing he would talk a lot about is some of the philosophers that he likes, that he got a different interpretation of what of their philosophies and their metaphors and thinking, based on which professor was kind of talking about it and discussing it,
Yes.
because you don't realize it, but your opinions are having an influence on the person that is listening, right?
Yeah.
And an influence on the just the facts and the information that you're presenting. And I mean, it's no different than like when people talk about AI or whatever. Like some people talk about these platforms, Facebook, whatever. Oh, we're just doing this. It's like, well, it's run by people, and any
Yes.
run by people, you can't pretend that their opinions or perspectives and their own personal philosophies don't have some effect on the work that they do, on the way they perceive information, on the way they present information. Like that's all going to have some effect. So yeah, I think that's a very valid point. And the other thing too about history is that based on what your personal philosophy is, or whatever team you're on, or whatever team you're rooting for, you might uh, cherry pick some information and leave some stuff out, or maybe I mean, how much of that have we seen with the whole Hamas Israel thing? Like people are just kind of rooting for their teams. There's
Yeah. That's
people.
been a tough one too, because it's like it's usually I think you can see them on like ideological lines of like what way somebody's gonna swing. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh, okay, this person would probably support this side, and it's kind of been like actually reversed in a lot of ways, which I think has been like kind of wild. Like the ideological lines have been like you haven't been able to predict that one, which has been interesting. And another one which has been super interesting too. This was actually one I think if you listen to the Culture War episode, we talked about it a little bit, but it was um this whole like Trump is Caesar thing, right? Like this whole thing that's like kind of going right now. And like I vehemently disagree with that concept, but the problem is you have to agree with my premise in order to actually agree with, my postulation, right? Like I think if you look at America as a republic, it fell in 1913. And sure, a lot of the vestiges are still there, right? Like we still do a lot of the same things, but like, the 17th Amendment took away the ability of states to represent themselves by, who they elected in the Senate, right? You look at income tax happened, you look at the Federal Reserve happened. Well, that's a soft coup, man. Like basically what happened there. So like people talk about like, the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire versus the US. Well, Caesar was a Roman Republic character towards the end of the Roman Republic, and in my opinion, the Republic's been dead for 100 years. So like we're kind of deep in the whole empire stage now. We're actually in the collapse of empire stage. But once again, you have to agree with my premise in order to actually accept the whole, kind of kit and caboodle after that.
Well, that's why history is such a hard thing to talk about because there's always going to be people that are going to try to tell you that you're wrong, or this historian said this, or this novel said that, this book said that. And I remember having Dan Carlin on years ago when I first.
Oh, Dan is the man. I had him on like right before COVID. We did an episode about like, imagine if a pandemic happened, what would people react to? And I'm like, Dan, you're prophetic, man. But go ahead.
Yeah, he's awesome. I had him on in like I think it was like 2013 or early 2000
Okay.
when I started, and he would always talk about how like it was so hard to do these podcasts on history because he would get so much negative feedback from somebody who would disagree with him. And
Mhm.
he would try to read all the things you could read and get all the perspectives, but there's always somebody who's upset. And also, like, we talked about, like, there's also the fact that like personal ideologies are going to come into play. And there's also even other agendas to why maybe certain things in our history are suppressed and other things aren't. I remember having historian Manuel Rosa on, and he was a Portuguese historian who like just he could read in all the languages required to really do a deep dive into the history of Columbus. And he found out that he was actually like born in Portugal, but he was possibly from a Polish family who were escaping Eastern Europe and making it or hiding out in Western Europe. And it was really fascinating. And when and same thing when I had Gerard Williams on, who did Escape of Adolf Hitler, about him making it to Argentina. Like there's things that like we just accept as truth, and then you have somebody who like kind of exposes the fact that we've been just kind of repeating a lie over and over again, and that's kind of you see that a lot in
Well, and it's even like history we don't find out right away. Like, right? Like look at something like, Project Paperclip or the Vatican rat lines and things like that. It's World War II was what are we at, like 80 years ago now? And if a lot of the things that, for a bit they were conspiracy theory, then we find a little bit more about them. And I think if you ask most people about Project Paperclip, it's accepted reality now, which is, Nazis being brought out of Germany and actually put into, different scientific fields in the US because their scientific knowledge was valued. Werner von Braun or Magnus von Braun or people like that. But if you ask people 50 years ago, those were conspiracy theories. I think it's also interesting the further away you get from events, what accepted reality is. Like look at the JFK assassination. Um, I'm sure if you asked any number of people, they'd say the CIA did it. So I think it's very interesting the further we get away from events, what we think about them.
Yeah, with that, I think a little bit also has to do with like the emotional connection to it. Like I remember 9/11 being one of those topics similar to like vaccines that would just get people worked up real quick. It's like you couldn't have a logical conversation with somebody about it because they would be so emotionally
Mhm.
involved in the conversation
It
that.
was a weird time in history though too, because I think people got real jacked up over, yeah, let's go get them, right? So like I know like myself, I think I was like 13 at that point in time, but I'm like, yeah, let's go into Iraq. And now I'm like, wow, that was a really dumb idea, right? Like it's you also get into the fervor of the times.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think 9/11 specifically for me, I think it was like, and people in my personal life and people I would talk to, I think it was just like, it was such a tragic event. And like, just having, I just had a Operation Fast and Furious whistleblower on the show not too long
Oh
ago.
wow.
He was also a 9/11 first responder. He was there, and he talks about the PTSD of like just hearing those bodies jumping out of that building and like just hearing those noises. And it just
Yeah.
I think watching even today, like watching the video, the videos of people jumping out and the buildings coming down, it's like it's so crazy that it's hard for us to comprehend. And I think if you
Yeah.
push it to the next level of like, okay, this, which is one of the most horrific things you might ever see in your life, possibly, there's some fuckery. Maybe they even let it happen. Maybe so there's some people involved. Like all of a sudden, people's minds blow up. And
Well, like I think even like 9/11, like what part of the country were you in at that time?
well, I was born in Portugal, but I've spent most of my life in Massachusetts.
Okay. So like for me, like I lived in New Jersey, and like the part of New Jersey I lived in, like everybody's parents worked in New York. So like it was a really weird that was a really weird day because like people's parents people were getting called to the office because like, there was a good chance that their parents were kind of part of this thing. So it's I think also like it's geographically is kind of a big part of that perspective too, because like for me, I'll never forget that, right? Like kind of seeing classmates, like finding out that something happened to their parents.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. And I think that kind of highlights what you were talking about, how like as time goes by and maybe as you can look at something more logically and less emotionally, it seems like people who weren't willing to have that discussion about maybe we were lied to about some things on in regards to 9/11, people are much more open to that now than they were at the time. Like I said, all the emotions and all that stuff. And I think with a lot of things in history, it's kind of like that, as people zoom out. It's like I'm sure during the JFK assassination era that people just had a hard time believing that the CIA or the Secret Service or whoever wasn't
Sure.
in that assassination. Now it's much easier to just kind of look back and not be emotionally involved and just be like, oh wow. But I even seeing
But I
those.
think that's one of the hardest things to accept, Ricky. Like if you look at it like to look at kind of one of the biggest things that you held true, right? Like one of the things that I guess I wouldn't say it's like sacred to you, but like I wrote something yesterday. I said, how would you react if you found out what you always thought were facts were actually propaganda? And it's like it's so wild to consider like if you look at things that you're always like, oh, that's just true, that's real, like to be able to challenge that, like some people can't challenge that. And I think when you get in there, that can be also the conundrum of it too.
See, I'm the opposite. I'm constantly looking to debunk my
Well,
worldview.
I am too, but I'm like for a lot of people, like you're like it's dogma they're questioning.
Yeah, I think people look at like being wrong or like or maybe there's a comfort in kind of thinking you have an understanding of how things work and that comfort like to get rid of that comfort and say, hey, everything you thought was true could possibly be a lie or used for social engineering or manipulation or whatever. That's scary for some people. To me, it's like it's about uncovering just everything. It's like you're trying to understand yourself and the world around you, and it's this lifelong journey of trying to do that. And I always use the metaphor of like, life's a giant puzzle, and you have all these scattered pieces, and you're trying to gather as many as possible. And by the end of your journey, you won't have the whole puzzle put together. But you're trying to gather as many pieces as possible to try to get somewhat of a blurry image for you, and a little bit of a
Yeah.
understanding of what it's all about. And that's why I love people who kind of just like turn what I think I understand completely upside down. I get obsessed with certain thinkers, like even uh Professor Michael Millerman, he was just
Mhm.
completely different than my pattern of thinking, because I think sometimes we get stuck in patterns of thinking where it's like, I'm always listening to the same podcast. I'm always reading the same writers. I'm always, having discussions with the same people. And then you get stuck in like this pattern. And it's no different than like, using a workout metaphor, like muscle confusion, right? Like I always say, I'm like, if I go work out with this person, I'm not going to like, I might become more sore because I'm doing something I'm not used to. I'm changing my routine, but it's good for me in the long run, right? Like because now I'm getting sore because I've adapted to this way of movement and exercising. And I think thinking's very similar, where you end up becoming just comfortable, and it's like this pattern of thinking that remains the same, and you need to kind of throw a curveball from time to time and like listen to a different perspective, listen to a different thinker, a different philosopher, a different, whoever it may be, and
Sure.
and just to kind of like, okay, like I haven't analyzed it from that perspective, or I haven't thought about it this way, and so that's really
I'm
important.
I'm actually kind of a scary rabbit hole guy in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? It's like interesting because like for me, like, and I look at different eras of my life, like I'll go down the rabbit hole of one person's work really, really deep, and then I'll be done with that and kind of move on to somebody else. So, like, I'm also like all over the board of like what I'll read politically and ideologically and stuff like that too. Cause I'm like, oh, that's interesting to me. Like I got sucked into I was just really interested in for a while of like wanting to understand like why were Nazis so into the occult. So I read all these different books around that, and I was like, wow, I really want to understand. So that led me to reading things like Parzival and things like that to just like understand what were these guys thinking, because I want to understand people's like thought processes. Or I dove really deep into the work of like Jim Mars, and I'll like read every book somebody wrote. Like I'm weird like that, and then once I'm done, I'll move on to somebody else. I'm like a weird rabbit hole guy, man, when it comes to like what I'll study, or like, I got really into France in the 1100s. As weird as that. So I read every book I can find about France in the 1100s, and then I'll move on. I'm strange like that.
I'm very similar. I'll go down weird rabbit holes and I'll be so like just focused on this one topic and subject, but then like I'll eventually I'll be like, okay, I'm done with this. Like, let me move on to something else. And if it's diet, nutrition, science, whatever it is, history, I'm the exact same way. And that's why like my podcast was kind of very similar to Rogan's when I started. It was like, okay, let me just get people on that I'm just a fan of and I'm interested in. So I'll have a Burton C. Bell from Fear Factory on. Then I'll have a Jim Florentine, a comedian. Then I'll have whoever, Professor Rupert Sheldrake on or whoever, and just anybody who I find fascinating. And that way it's good for my ADD because that way I don't get bored. I can just kind of keep going back and forth. But you did go down the Rome rabbit hole.
I
What,
did real deep.
yeah, and what moved you to want to do that?
So, in my college experience is kind of weird. So my undergrad degree, I'm a double major in Catholic theology and world religions. Then I went to England for a bit and I studied literature at New College, Oxford, and then I actually came back and got my master's in the Roman Empire. But I had this, and once again, like I said, I'm somebody that reads way too much and reads like really obscure stuff. Like I think it's like the more obscure, the more interesting it is to me. So like I read this really weird, it was a 1-page paper, but it was by this Jesuit priest named Father Cuthbert Leite. It was written around the turn of the century, so around the early 1900s. And he talks about in 31 BC, after the Battle of Actium. This Actium was kind of the final battle where Augustus finally becomes like emperor, like, right? Like emperor in like position, but not in name. The kind of how that happens is established a little bit more, but it's like kind of the final battle, I guess you could say. And the thing he does is after the Battle of Actium, Actium is a city in Western Greece. He goes and actually prays in front of the mummified sarcophagus of Alexander the Great. And I'm like, okay, that's really weird. I'm like, number one, what is Alexander's sarcophagus doing in this random Greek city? And number two, like, why is he praying before it? And that kind of led me down this like really long road of like, my main thing I actually ended up writing on for my grad thesis was on Roman ruler worship and like kind of how they set up the cult of Roman ruler worship. And it wasn't that Augustus was interested in worshiping Alexander. He wanted people to see him, I guess, worshiping Alexander as a god. It wasn't that he believed it. It's what he wanted people to see, the propaganda of it. So then he was brilliant in that way. So he actually had observed this competition for popularity between his adopted father, Julius Caesar, and Pompey the Great. And he kind of looked at a lot of the propaganda tools they did. And from that, he learned how to propagandize people better. And basically, he used those tools in that competition and then a fascination with Alexander to convince people he was divine. And that's really how ruler worship lasts another, almost 500 years after Augustus. So for me, I was so interested in Alexander the Great. Like that was something that was the rabbit hole I was in at the time. And I was reading absolutely everything I could. And I had picked up this random article that I had found on, there's like an online place you can look for articles called JSTOR. And I had searched for Alexander, and this is like the last article I could find. And that's what actually led me to Rome, as weird as it is. It's a really roundabout way of getting there, but that's how I got there.
And diving deep into Rome, like, was there anything that was especially fascinating that you think, because I think a lot of times we, like I said, we go down these rabbit holes to better understand ourselves or the world around us. What do you think stuck out that really helped you collect some pieces to like understanding the world around you? Maybe on how politics works, because like people say, and I don't know who to give credit to, but history doesn't always repeat, but it typically rhymes. You
Yeah.
see patterns happening over and over again. What did you learn from that time of the Roman Empire that you can look at current times and say, okay, yeah, that's very similar, or maybe things haven't changed that much in regards to the human interaction, political, things, and how just the world works in general.
Well, I think number one, like if you just want to look at like just Rome in general versus now, I think they were much more overt in what they were going to do, right? Like, if they didn't like you, they were going to beat you to death, right? Or they were going to kill a politician right out in the public. We're more covert in how we do things now, right? Like, we'll character assassinate somebody, or we'll ruin them, or like we're much more covert in how we handle people. So I think that's one thing that was really interesting to me. But I think as well, there's kind of a major confusion when people hear Rome of like what that means. And there's three kind of key eras in Rome, or time periods. Rome's founded in 753 BC by Romulus. Maybe he existed, maybe didn't exist. We don't know. And he's the first of what are Rome's seven traditional kings. And the final king, I don't remember them all in order, but I believe the last one was Tarquin the Proud, or Tarquin Superbus is his name. Was assassinated by this guy named Brutus, and that's kind of significant because the assassin of Caesar's name is also Brutus. So 509 is when this seven traditional kings of Rome ends, and because of having those kings, Romans like hated kingship. There's so the idea of king, and this is really important throughout Rome's history, of like never really portraying yourself as a king because Romans can't accept that. So from 509 to 31 is the Roman Republic. So 509 BC to 31 BC. And I'm not going to go woke history. I will not use BCE. I'm not doing that before Common Era. We do BC here. So from 509 to 31 BC is the Roman Republic. And it didn't have a written constitution, but they had a lot of agreements and traditions and things that functioned for a really long time. You start to have in the last kind of 100 years, so 133 to 31, you have this what's known as the Roman Revolution, and people just start ignoring laws, and politicians just start doing what they're going to do. And you have these military leaders, the first of which being Gaius Marius, that start using their armies to basically create power for themselves. So you have this with Gaius Marius, you have this with Lucius Cornelius Sulla, and the final of which everybody knows, is Julius Caesar. They say you weren't supposed to bring armed men into the city of Rome, like it was kind of like not acceptable. And Caesar was asked to report to the Senate, and they said, disband your legions. And he goes, I will not disband my legions. And that's where the whole idea of crossing the Rubicon comes from. So he kind of declared he starts operating as dictator for life. There was an office in Rome called the dictator, and the dictator was basically, for a 6-month period, you would be given total power to solve a situation. And Caesar takes advantage of that and says, I'm going to be dictator for life. And that's really the fall of the Republic. The empire is then established by his adopted son, which, because you could adopt full adults at that point in time and give them your titles, your money, your power, whatever it may be. And that's Gaius Octavius, who becomes Gaius Octavius Caesar Augustus. And that's the first emperor. But he doesn't call himself an emperor. He calls himself princeps. It's where we get the English prince from, but princeps in this case means the first citizen. So they still had the Senate, they still had a lot of the same offices and everything, but this person was added at the front of it, which was the first citizen. Because once again, since Rome hated kings, they could find a first citizen more acceptable. And that's the empire, 31 to around 476. So I think that's kind of the major thing that people have to understand, is these three time periods, because people are like, oh, Trump is Caesar, or this is that, or, like whatever it may be. And in my opinion, Ricky, I think, like, once again, as you said, history, it doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. I think the thing we're actually most similar to right now is Rome's crisis of the 3rd century. and they have from about 192 with the death of Commodus, who's the son of Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius gets way too much credit. He did a bad job as a ruler. To 284 with the ascension of Diocletian, there's 47 different emperors in that time period, and there's military generals raising armies and attacking Rome and declaring themselves in charge. But the major problems they had are very similar to now. 15,000% inflation, because basically they were just spending money on the military because that's how they ran things. Immigration was a massive problem. And they also had this central power problem. And I think if you look at it now, um, the central power problem should be solved by our 10th Amendment, but we don't really do it anymore. So I think if you look at that time period, are people attacking Washington, D.C.? No. But I think we are seeing very similar problems of immigration, inflation, and central power. Sorry, I know that was really long, but like to get it, there is a lot to it.
Uh, so one thing that a lot of people have been interested in, I'd like your opinions on, the Library of Alexandria. Like what, there's all this mystery, right, on what possibly was there and why they burned it, what survived. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I honestly don't know much about it. I know it was burned a few times. The first time it was burned under Julius Caesar. It's burned again in the late empire. I don't remember under which emperor. So I imagine there was probably a lot of great knowledge in there, since it was kind of the major, like Alexandria was the major learning center of that time period. But I don't know a lot of what was actually in there.
In regards to the cultism, you talked about it a little bit. It is fascinating historically, from Hitler and to many other people. They seem to have some links to it, some fascination with it. What have you learned about historically, like how, like the fascination with it? Do you have any thoughts on why it seems that so many different eras of history seem to have this occultism pop up?
It's, what's really interesting? There's a few things that kind of flow through a lot of them as much as it is. Like number one, like the Nazis were very interested in Apollo, like the Greek god Apollo. And then if you go back to, I had mentioned I was like really interested in like France in the southern France in the early 1000s. And that was a place called the Languedoc. They spoke this interesting kind of mix of French and Spanish and Latin all together. And they were actually people known as Cathars, and they were very interested. They had this weird blend of Christianity and the worship of Apollo, and the Pope didn't like that. So the Pope was like, "All right, I'm gonna handle this." So the Pope decides he's gonna kill them all. So that's where we have the Albigensian Crusade, is where the Pope kind of rolls in and kills everybody. But the thing that's interesting, and I continue to kind of look into this, and I don't have the answer, but if you look at a lot of these like occultist like worship cults, a lot of it is connected to Apollo, which is very interesting. Like the idea of a light bringer, which is, I think, very, very interesting. If you look at like Christianity and the name Lucifer for the devil, like that's the idea. Lucifer comes from the idea of a light bringer. So it's quite interesting how that thread goes through a lot of these different religions and the occult and different things as well.
Yeah, I feel like all these things are connected with one another in regards to like
Zeitgeist.
yeah, well, yeah, off knowledge, right? When you look at like just I look at the work of people like Dr. Jack Kraus and Dr. Tom Cowan and people who are completely reanalyzing and rethinking the way the human body works. And
Oh,
then,
Jack Cruz, he's been on my show. He's a cool guy.
oh, you've had him on. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah, it was a number of years ago, but he's a real like he has this whole idea of like how like we don't use light the right way in the human body, and like how like basically by using sunblock we're killing ourselves.
well, yeah, because like he's said, and I've said numerous of times. I mean, even being Portuguese, like obviously we can handle a little bit of sun, but I've never put sunscreen on my body at all. My kids have never done it. I tell my wife.
I'm like mainly Irish, man, so it's like I cook in any sort of, so I guess I need to apply more of the knowledge that he's talking about, because I cook in any sunlight whatsoever.
What he's saying, it's not based. Well, there was some article about how as sunscreen use has gone up, so has skin cancer. So,
Yeah, that I've heard because
you
it's
know,
a lot of the chemicals are kind of seeping through your largest organ.
yeah, exactly. It's their largest organ, and and when you look at like, so there's a lot of things like historically that we repeat over and over again that could be untrue, and also obviously scientifically and in the science history, because it's like people will say, hey, this is all based on this one guy's work, and then everybody just keeps repeating that, and nobody goes back and analyzes his work and says, hey, his work was based on bullshit. But um, in regards to, I mean, you see that with like the vaccine stuff, and I'm I will proudly say that my kids have never had a vaccine. Of course,
Mine haven't either. I have two daughters, and neither of them have had any.
yeah, yeah, and according to what our pediatricians would say, we're putting them in danger. But when you talk to them about vaccine information and studies and whatnot, they just don't. They basically are just parrots for big pharma. They just repeat what big pharma tells them to repeat.
Well, you
And
even look at like mental development. Like my kids are 5.5, and then my other will be 3 in a couple weeks. And you just even look at their mental development versus kids their age because they haven't had, mercury and a lot of those different drugs in their body. Like they're like my 5-year-old is like a 10-year-old. Like it's very interesting when you even look at kids' mental development when they haven't had all that stuff in their body.
yeah, who would have thought if you don't put poison into their bloodstream that it'd be good for them. It's just funny how backward certain things are. I mean, it's almost like, and not to say that some typical treatments and medicine doesn't work. It just this one size fits all. It's just silly. I've used this metaphor over and over again on this podcast. I'm sure the listeners are sick of me using it, but it's such a great way of highlighting how absurd the vaccines are safe and effective for everybody type of mentality is. I mean, I always say, like, if I give every person in the world peanut butter, some people are going to die. And if you say, hey, that person didn't get any adverse reactions from peanut butter because I eat peanut butter and my friend eats peanut butter and everybody's fine. It's like, that's kind of the same argument they make with vaccines, where it's like, well, if vaccines can cause autism or can cause autistic symptoms or some cognitive issues, like, how do you explain I've got vaccinated, I'm fine, or my kid, it's like, well, it's not.
But you even look at like as you like so we were both born in the 80s. You look at the number of vaccines, you and I had when we were kids, it was like probably less than 5. And they're jacking these kids up with like 70 or 80 now, which is it's insane. Like when kids are in a developmental stage.
Well, you have no the thing is they just keep adding it to the schedule, and every time you add it to the schedule, one more vaccine, you're literally printing money because nobody questions the schedule and people just
Correct.
do it. And there's, it just people just assume like, hey, if you're giving it to kids, then it can't be bad. And to me, it's craziness because like even thimerosal, which was in vaccines and I believe still in some, for a long time, pediatricians would tell you that, oh, it's not bad for you or whatever. It's not enough to have a negative effect on you or whatnot. And but again, like not everybody will have the same response to a vaccine or any medication whatsoever. And so when you look at like a lot of things like mental health, for example, like there's plenty of positive ways like working out is better for you than most antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. The DSM has the word statistic and science and stuff in its title and whatnot, and there's no real science in it. It's all based on like just general stuff that human beings go through because
Well, you even look at like the that's this comes from somebody that was diagnosed ADHD when I was a kid, and my parents like, okay, we're gonna put you in private school. They don't have ADHD there, and like you look at it, it's the symptoms of childhood. If you read like the list of symptoms, you're like, that's called being a kid. Like even like the way we educate our kids now, like they weren't meant to sit in a chair for 6 to 8 hours a day. Of course, they're gonna want to move around and do stuff and get distracted. You know what I mean? Like I think we look at the wrong why a lot of times.
yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of times it's also like somebody trying to profit from it, right? So it's like, oh, okay,
Absolutely.
your kid can't sit still. Hey, we can come up with a pill to give you, to give you and give to your kid and make him a zombie. And the way I look at him, like if you, first of all, there's just different personalities and different types of people, just in general. I mean, I know people that are more energetic. I know people who are less energetic. I know people who love to be social. I know people want to be left alone. And so it's like, why would kids be no different? And my kids both play sports. They when they're not playing sports, I'm bringing them to the park or doing something, going for a walk, doing something physical. So when you create it's no different than you and I. Like if we're used to exercising every day and we're in great shape and we're full of energy, it'd probably be pretty hard for us to sit down and just, listen to a boring lecture for, 6 hours out of the day. So to me, it's like, okay, I have energetic kids. They're healthy. They should be full of energy. Like a healthy kid should be like, I don't have energy when I don't feel great. When I feel great is when I have energy. So it's like, to me, it's like, that's a healthy kid if he's full of energy and whatnot. Maybe instead of looking at, like you said, instead of asking why the kid won't sit still, how about we ask the right why question? Like, why
Well,
is
here's an example. So like as an adult, I love Shakespeare, right? But in seventh grade, I was really struggling with Old English, which a lot of those words are hard, right? And so I was really struggling, and I made the statement, Shakespeare sucks. I got suspended from school for a week for that. So instead of taking a look at it and saying, what is this kid struggling with? Can we help him with the definition of the words? Like maybe he's not understanding Old English versus modern English. Like instead of doing that, they suspend the kid. It's like, what? Like we don't look at this stuff the right way.
Well, I was the same way. When I came to the country, I was behind in school because I was learning a second language, and I just never really caught up in regards to the school system. They, put me in special education. They, I was always like trying to play catch up, and then, really got to a point where I'm just like, okay, well, they think I'm an idiot. Maybe I don't like history. Maybe I don't like, any of these things. And after getting out of school more like later in high school, start doing my own research and kind of learning things at my own rate and really being able to dive deep into topics that I found interesting. And I'm like, oh, I don't hate learning. I'm like, I just didn't like the method they were trying to force feed me this information. And it's not always the teacher's fault because for some weird reason, teachers like to drink, and a lot of them, I think, is dealing with like just the issue, the shitty kids for 6 hours a day. Like, there's certain
It's like also like I don't think the system is setting them up to win, right? Like you put a teacher in a classroom with 20, 30 or 40 kids. And this is coming from somebody that did it. Like we're not setting them up in a way for the teacher to win either, right? Like it's like you get up there and you want a kid to like just do rote memorization. Well, some kids can't do that, right? Like some kids learn differently. So I think also like we need to like school needs to be more individualized, right? Like I think that's where you're going to see kids win, right? Like you see kids win when they work on individualized programs, and then the teacher's there if the kid, hits a roadblock or they don't understand a word or something like that. I think that's where the teacher should be valuable. But to say everybody has to learn at the exact same speed, of the exact same curriculum, in the exact same way, like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and there's more and more milestones now than there was. Like, so now parents will start freaking out that their pediatrician or their teacher said, "Hey, they should be doing this at this age," and they're not. And it's like, okay, well, should they be doing that at that age? Like, that seems a little advanced, or that seems a little blown out of proportion. And oh, they got to go to an expert. They have to do this. So it's like that's concerning too, because it's like now you freak out parents, and a kid can struggle in one thing and be amazing at another thing. You see it all the time with kids who when you get them doing the thing they really enjoy, they're incredibly intelligent and capable, and then you get them doing something they don't enjoy, and all of a sudden they seem like they're idiots, right? And I forget who said it, but I remember somebody saying this, and it's so true. They're like, find the thing that you enjoy doing that somebody else would consider work, and that's your thing. Pursue that, right? So it's like certain things, like, okay, we like going to the gym, you and I. We like having conversations with interesting people. Some people, to them, that would be work, like sitting down and picking at somebody's brain and having to share their thoughts or whatever, or going to the gym every day. So it's like if
I
you
think also like it's a skill you build as well, right? Like if I like as a host, I've done closing in on 1,200 interviews, and like if you listen to my early ones, like they make me cry. So I think you kind of you build the skills of not just like interviewing and having a conversation, but also how to prepare for that conversation, right? Because like if I look at what I did in the beginning, like dude, those poor people that were on the other side of that jail cell interrogation I was doing, where now it's like I pick a couple like topics that I hope to get to, right? Like, but it's you get much more structured and you're able to kind of practice, right? And I think that's one of the major things is people don't want to build a practice skill, which is going to take them thousands of hours.
Well, I I would disagree a little bit because I think
Okay.
if you and this is why, because I think that if you really enjoy it, like if it's something you enjoy, it never really feels like practice or work, right? Like I feel
I don't think it feels like work or practice, but I'm saying amazing out of the gate isn't always the case.
no, without a doubt, no, you definitely aren't. And but I guess my point was more that fine, like kids should if you see that a kid has, like you said, has a knack for something and they enjoy that thing, like I said, like something that maybe would be work to somebody else. Like I know guys who love working on cars. Like I was a
Yeah.
car guy. I still am a car guy. I love, I've grown up. My brother and I had a little car club. We still go to car shows in the summer with buddies and we cruise together. And but I hated working on my car. I hate detailing my car. Like I would rather just pay somebody else to do it because you like once I run into that one nut that won't come off and my whole afternoon is screwed and I'm like and I don't have the right tools or whatever. But that
Sure.
here and I'm just
I just did brakes on my wife's car, so I'm laughing because like I didn't run into anything and I was kind of like I got done and I'm like, where was the thing I was expecting? It didn't happen. It was like one of the first times like, there wasn't like a seized bolt or something like that.
But I know mechanics that in their in their spare time, they work on their own personal cars. And I'm like, that's work to me. And to them, it's a hobby. And I'm like, so if we could, like you said, specialize things where it's like, okay, you have
Yeah.
this, you enjoy this. It's something that other people would consider work, but to you, it's enjoyable. That's what we should be pushing kids in that direction. Like you said, start specializing the school system a little earlier so they can really expand on those things. And
Yeah, like I think early on, like you need language, you need math, you need those things, but like I think there's just to think everybody learns at the same pace is crazy.
yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, it's I think specializing school would fix a lot because I think a lot of the kids who aren't paying attention or aren't doing well, it's because of that. It's because it's stuff that they're not interested in. And like you said, there's some basic things that I think every kid should have some schooling in and whatnot, but there's also a lot of learning outside of school, right? Like well, I was it Mark Twain who said school got in the way of my learning or whoever said that, but it's true. I say that every time my kids for whatever reason we end up having to take a day off for a soccer tournament or whatever from school, and I'm always like, oh, don't worry about it. School got in the way, it gets in the way you're learning. But it's a joke, but in a way it's like it's true because outside of school your learning doesn't stop. You're having conversations with people, you're analyzing the world around you, you're having experiences either
But even that, like that can also have like more value than like school learning as well. Like I don't have a huge amount of property, but I live on like almost 5 acres here. So like we have that. We have 2 dozen chickens. I have a pig. Like so my kids know all about farm animals. They have, learned about feeding chickens. They've learned about reproduction. Like there's a lot of things like, so I think it's there's things that are really valuable to learn that you can learn from just life experience too.
Yeah, that's why I also think homework is bullshit. I'm just like, you have my kid 6 hours.
Right. It should have all been done in school. Why are we doing this at home?
Yeah, well, when you really analyze how much time they have after getting out of school, it's like by the time they eat and they settle down, like you really are giving them very little time to like live life and like do
Yes.
things they enjoy. And to me, it's like if you
Or to
can't.
find what they enjoy.
Yeah, well, very good point. Yeah, just fine with their like having the time to dibble dabble in a bunch of different sports or interests or hobbies, and then find that thing that you like. And yeah, so without a doubt, like my wife will sometimes get mad at me because I'll tell my kids, I'm like, if you want to do your homework, don't worry about it. Because sometimes we'll just be busy. We really will, and we'll just be, right after school, go to practice, do this, and then whatever and then next thing you know it's like we're struggling to find time to really sit down and do the homework and I'm just like if you don't want to do it You're 9. I don't care. And if your teacher has a problem, have her call me. I'm like, we can talk about it. I'll tell her the same thing that I think, you have my kid 6 hours out of the day. If you can't get through to them in 6 hours, then, what are you doing? Like, and the other thing too is like, if you have questions, if you're in class with your teacher, you can ask the teacher. They can explain it and describe it in the way that they're trained to do so. You might not like my explanation. You might not like or I might not even be like many parents say this now. It's like, oh, they don't even do math the same way we did math. Like it's just
Oh,
completely
don't
different.
even get me started on that. We don't need to be doing critical theory math here. Like it's a little extreme, man.
No, I completely agree, and I think it can put off some kids also, and so yeah, so and I think that as a society and as a culture, like starting there, like uh, I think schooling and creating people who just regurgitate information don't really care if we haven't really instilled the idea of like, hey, like you should knowing information is good, but it should be relevant to something, and it should
Yes.
help you understand something. And just knowing information for information's sake seems pointless. And
Well, I think that's important too, because like for me, like I look at information for like how valuable to me is based on its utility. Like if it doesn't have any utility, then it doesn't have a ton of value to me.
and so in regard to like the stuff that you dive deep into on your podcast or even in your personal time, what stuff are you diving deep into now in regards to like what's got your attention?
So, like obviously, like we're covering certain political topics. I feel like that's important, but like I'm a big believer in what Andrew Breitbart talked about that politics is actually downstream from culture, and I'm very interested because I think like it's wild, man. Like things that were allowed to be jokes in the 90s like are like very serious now. Like it's kind of shocking. And so to me, I'm interested in looking at like what's happening to our culture and how can we shift culture. So, it's taking a look at, like what do we need to know about all this gender craziness that's happening? What do we need to know about, getting back to family? So we talk a lot about a lot of things like that, man. Like how do we get back to reestablishing culture? Because unless we can fix culture, like politics doesn't really matter that much. And I think that that's a lot of what we're talking about is things that are cultural and that can actually like make an effect because I don't recognize culture anymore. And especially in the last 5 years, it's been out of control.
When you say you don't recognize culture, do you mind expanding on that? Like what?
Like to for somebody to be like, hello, my name is blah, and my pronouns are blah blah blah. It's like, what the hell just happened to you? Like, I don't understand. Like to me, those things just don't make sense. Like my 3-year-old, it was we were at the grocery store the other day, and the 3-year-old looks at the cashier and goes, "Are you a boy or are you a girl?" Hey, I'm talking to you. Are you a boy or are you a girl? And the cashier freaked out and left the register. Like, like what kind of a society do we live in now where we're lifting up a lot of these things that are just strange. So like to me that's what I'm interested in finding out. Like how do we get back to like things we have commonality on? How do we get back to what's normal? Do you know what I mean? Like there's I know it upsets a lot of people, but there's two genders. But it really bugs people to say whatever. If you said that 10 years ago, that was acceptable. Now it's kind of like, it's you go into Baskin Robbins and you pick like which one you're going to get of the 57 flavors. So it's like to me, I just think reality has been so skewed and the things we agreed upon 10 years ago, like are just not true now. Like even like you look at what's happened to comedy. Like there's a few really great comics out there, but like a lot of comedians are talking about things that you're like, how is that funny? Because you have to make sure it doesn't offend anybody or doesn't do whatever. Like comedy's supposed to be offensive. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. But like we've really kind of messed up society in a lot of ways.
Now, I guess this is a bigger question and maybe
Yeah.
not a simple one, but who has messed up society? I know it's like where do I start, right? But
Yeah, well, I'm more of the viewpoint of like and this is where people call me crazy, but I look at it, it's kind of more of like a Marxist cultural revolution is kind of my viewpoint. And people are like, oh, is it China? Is it this? Is it that? And I don't think it's really that. I think it's more ideology because if you look at it, Paulo Freire was this Brazilian theologian and also like philosopher. And that ideology is a lot of what got into our colleges of education. So you're seeing colleges of education, which are what create your teachers and things like that, going into these universities, going into high schools. So they're bringing in this kind of Marxist ideology, and everything's through a critical lens now. And I think, do you know what I mean by say when I say critical lens?
Yeah.
Like looking at like that conflict, because Marxism is initially conflict. So whether it's class conflict, whether it's money conflict, whether it's race conflict, so we're always looking for the conflict in everything rather than what is. So I think that's the major kind of seed we're seeing is this Marxist ideology kind of starting with college of education and over the last 30 years leaking into the rest of society.
So when you look at like people like George Soros or Bill Gates, and you look at them trying to obviously mold the world in a certain way, or maybe destabilize the world in a certain way, do you think it's ideology that's motivating them? Do you think it's
I don't.
you don't?
No, I don't, because I think they look at it as, because I think here's the thing, like people want to say like there's, it's global communism that's the problem, or it's the World Economic Forum that's the problem, or it's this group that's the problem, or it's the Illuminati that's the problem. And I think like the actual situation is, Ricky, you have a lot of groups trying to destabilize the world to put in their own ideas. And for a time period, they'll cooperate enough until there's a certain time period when they decide who gets to be the person that actually runs everything. So I think a lot of people like Bill Gates and Soros and things are purely doing it for their own personal interest. They're doing it for what's good for them. And maybe they'll cooperate with a group because at the time they can use that group to help get power. And I think that's kind of the situation we're in. Is it's not one overarching ideology. There's personal interests of some rich, powerful people that think they know better than you, and there are a few of these kind of global groups happening at the same time, and they'll cooperate to a certain extent. But once they have made us more subservient, well, they'll decide which one of them is in charge, and they'll work that out later. So that's kind of my viewpoint on it.
So you don't think that Bill Gates, his obviously you've heard his links, his family's links to eugenics and whatnot, and then when you look at like him talking about depopulation and then his vaccine agendas, like you don't think don't you think that's probably motivated by a ideology? And like you said, it probably is a lot of different moving parts, and like
Sure.
Soros has the Open Society Foundation or whatever it's called, and they've been influencing politics all over the world, and I think they probably both have a worldview, and they're trying.
Sure, they have a worldview, but I think at the same time, it's also just about pure power. Like if you look at what happened to Alexander the Great at the end of his life, like the guy was this great philosopher king, and he tried to make people equal and do a lot of these different things. And at a certain standpoint, he drank his own Kool-Aid too long, and he went nuts. And he started thinking he was the son of God and he was this divine being and things like that. So I think people get to the certain point where sure there's a bit of ideology involved. Like I don't think you don't believe anything, but you get to a certain point where you've drank your own Kool-Aid so much and you think you're so much better than everybody that you're just going to decide what you're going to do.
But what's influencing what you're going to do? Like, don't you think it's a worldview? It's a ideology.
It's definitely a worldview, but I think they expand past that. Do you know what I mean? Like they start to think like, Bill Gates is this, he probably has this opinion of himself like you wouldn't believe. Now there's an ideology that's formed that to a certain standpoint, but I think people also eventually move past their ideology, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Do you get what I'm saying? Like you
I
get to a
do.
certain point because you believe something, but then you start to become a Leviathan, right? And you start to kind of you've drank your own Kool-Aid so long that you kind of believe it.
Yeah, well, I think that is the issue. I think anytime you have that much influence and power, and you have so many yes men around you, and you can move things in one direction or another, uh, whatever your worldview or ideology is, you're gonna assume that you're just smarter and better than everybody else, and it's the
Correct.
worldview and ideology. And I think that there's well, I forget that video that used to be in documentaries back in the day of that. that guy who was friends with, I think he was, I don't know if it was David Rockefeller or somebody in the family, and he would talk about how, it's like, why do you care about the other people? Like, just it's about us, and it's about, like it was just highlighting this view of like the elite looking down upon everybody else, and that's why they give you this false sense of freedom and democracy, and it's like George Carlin would say, if voting mattered, they wouldn't let you do it. It's like they let you pretend you have some say. And
Yeah.
but the truth is they really think we're idiots, and they feel like they're a ruling class just as much as the British, kings and queens and the royal.
What it comes down to, like they get to a certain standpoint or level of success or whatever it may be, and they just you don't matter anymore. Like you're just kind of an ant. So I think I guess if you had to look at it, like sure, that's definitely I guess an ideology, but I think like they're kind of it's George Carlin again talks about there's a club and you ain't in it, and I think that's kind of exactly how they look at things.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems like people are much more open to that. One thing I would say over and over again is that House of Cards and Game of Thrones is the same story in different eras. Like it's
Sure.
just and really that's just the story of history. When people would talk about conspiratorial topics and a elite or a shadow government or any of these things, people would be like, "Oh, you're crazy." And it's like any time in history, there's been people and people who want to rule over those people. Like that's
Correct.
always happened. With this idea that we think that now is any different. I'm like, it's like that quote. I don't know why I keep referring to quotes today, but the devil's biggest trick is convincing you that he doesn't exist. I say that the elite have done the same thing. Their greatest trick was convincing
Yeah.
that they don't exist, and there's people
We
who.
look at what's happened in history and like to think that like we're so civilized now and we're so this and we're so that, like why would we just stop doing all the crazy shit we've done throughout history? Do you know what I mean? Like to think we're past that now is crazy.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's why when you look at I also think that's also why people are becoming much more open to the idea that there are people who, a George, I mean, a long time ago, you talk about Bill Gates or George Soros, people would look at you like you're crazy. Like they're just businessmen. They're just trying to whatever, and now
Become acceptable now.
yeah, without a doubt, and I think that's a good thing because now they're being exposed for what they really are, and that's dangerous, and so definitely we're going in that direction. It's funny how like one extreme creates the other extreme, right? So it's you get the extreme of just what is a woman uh, all this crazy sexualization of children and craziness and the pushing of it onto the public with Disney movies and whatnot and entertainment, and then you get the other extreme where it's like now people who were ignoring this stuff for a long time didn't really think it was a huge deal are now waking up to it, and now they're motivated to fight back against it. So
Yeah.
that
Well,
gets
it's also like it's the struggle of tolerance, right? Like we want to be good people. I think humans are innately good. I think there's a small percentage that aren't, but I think we're innately good. And we want to tolerate other people and permit other people and be friendly and be nice. But I think sometimes being too tolerant of things that, if you look at it that don't like things that don't make sense or that can be like bad for society, like that's how you let these things continue.
do you think there's a spiritual awakening also happening?
I would agree with that. I would agree with that because I think as if you look at kind of government and things have come so hard down against religion that I think it's made people realize like, well, I guess this has to be something spiritual. There has to be more to it. So I think we've really seen a spiritual awakening. Like you even look at what happened on Easter with Trans Day of Visibility falling on Easter this year. There was a lot of people saying, like, you know, I'm going to go to church. Like there was a lot of people I spoke to that weren't planning on going that are like, you know what? Like I feel like I at least need to go and be there. And so I think we're seeing people waking up to being spiritual, where I think that over the past 10 years we've really gone away from that. So I think we're really seeing a wake up now because people have I think when you see evil to the extent we've seen evil in the last 4 or 5 years, that in order for there to be light, there has to be darkness. So I think it's been a proof to people that there is something more.
And do you think that's why a lot of spiritual people could see the evil and recognize the evil and accept that there was evil things going on much quicker than the average person?
I think so too, because it goes back to the idea of tolerance, right? Like people are like, oh, is it bothering me? No, okay, cool. Then I don't want to worry about it. But I think when it got to the point where like it was bothering you and you didn't have a choice, I think then people look at it and they're confronted with evil. When you're confronted with evil, as I said, in order for darkness to exist, there has to be light in order to compare it to. And I think that kind of is the position it puts people in.
Yeah, it's funny because growing up, I was a Catholic, and I kind of pushed back against it, became a atheist for a long time, and then eventually came back around to like being like, okay, there's as I uncover more things about this universe, there seems to be a lot of things we can't understand, and
Sure.
to me, that only made me more spiritual because I'm like, there's just something that science is not explaining correctly, and they get it wrong all the time, so they don't have the answers. And so it's funny how a lot of people have gone that way. To quote Sam Tripoli, my co-host on the Union of the Unwanted and the host of Tinfoil Hat podcast, he always says how conspiracy always leads to spirituality, and we're talking about that with Adam Curry on the Union of the Unwanted the last episode, and he was a example of it because was never a spiritual or religious person, and now he's going to church and he's become much more spiritual. I mean, do you think that what's going on in the world, it's the suppression of what seems to be community spirituality? Because I think that's like some of the similarities that
People want to reach for what they can't have, right? Like I think it's just, how we are as people and how we're put together. So it's like if you're being told, this isn't good, you can't congregate, you can't be together. Like if you look at a lot of like, movements throughout history, where did they begin? They began in community and they began in churches, and they began in places like that. So like people are reaching for what they're told they can't have. I think that's the simplicity of it.
do you think it's because they can't have it, or is it because there's a need for it and we're
Well, I
being
think there's definitely a need for it, but I think you don't realize the need until you go for what you can't have. Does that make sense? So it's like you're told you can't have the thing, then you get the thing, you're like, oh my God, this was missing in my life. And I think until you have it, you don't know it was missing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, isn't that a song like you don't know what you have until it's gone?
Yes, I don't know. You can't always get what you want. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the same song. Yes, but yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think community. There's a lot of even like just traditions. For example, like I have friends of mine that are Lebanese and Salvadorians and Estonians and people from all over the world, and a lot of my family being right off the boat Portuguese. We still do things like they get friends and family together and they make sausage. They get friends and family together and they make wine. And I'm like, okay, you could buy this stuff, right? But you're bringing people together, and it's always like a lot of these things, these traditions that continue. I think that's a big part of it. It's like this realization of how happy we are and how complete we are and how much better we are when we're together and we have communities and we help each other out and we have reasons and purposes to kind of gather together. And I have one of my good friends, Robbie. He's from Lebanon, and he does Ramadan. And he's not a very strict Muslim per se. We go out from time to time. He'll have a drink with us from time, whatever. And he's not, but he does, and he's been asked like, why do you do this if you're not like strict with every Muslim belief? And he's like, I enjoy the celebration at the end of the night when we all eat together. I enjoy and it's like you realize like that's a big part of it, of these traditions, and it's like the common denominator is community and people,
Yes.
right? And I'm sure you see it from analyzing history.
Well, I think it's interesting because it's like if you look at kind of what we've been pushed into now, we're pushed into our phones, we're pushed into social media, we're pushed into all these different things, which actually it's kind of a wild like thing to think about. Like we're so connected that we're not. Does that make sense? Like we're so over connected that we're not connected at all because now the connection we have is with this device and that's how we see the world. And I think like what we actually need is community. We need a way to get together. We need a way to converse again. We need a way because that's where the best ideas come from. That's where the best thoughts come from. That's where the best um, you know, literature comes from, the best music and culture and things like that. And I think that's also a major cause of kind of where our culture is headed is, we're on what gets clicks and what gets likes and what gets views, and how do you feel about that, right? Like look what social media does to people's reactions to it. So I think we're quote unquote so social that we're not social at all, man. And I hate to see what this looks like further down the road if we just keep diving in further to that.
Yeah, I think we also now we thought that you could recreate human interaction with, by making it easier via internet and phones and whatnot. And we realize now, and I think a lot of people are realizing that, like, it's not the same. It's not a good substitute to real human interaction. And even if you have, like you said, all the connection in the world via internet and Instagram and Facebook and all these digital ways of connecting with your friends, you still feel disconnected if you're not having real human interactions with them. And, you know, to me, it's one of the few things that makes me optimistic about the future is that people are realizing that real human community and interaction can't be replaced, and that no matter how good these digital devices are, there's going to be something missing. I think even with like
Well,
Zoom.
you even look at like, so I've run an agency since, as I mentioned, for almost 10 years now. Like even hiring is different because like you look at like, I'm not going to pick up on a lot of your social cues. I'm not going to pick up on a lot of how you look at things. Like I'm not going to, there's a lot of things you can see about a person that you would pick up through actually being with them and being around them, right? And I think it does make it harder to hire people now because now, like, sure, you have like testing and things you do with people when you hire them. Your interview process got to be good, but like it's a lot more of like, well, how are they doing on the job and how are they fitting in? And I think that is harder because if you bring in somebody that really shouldn't be a part of your organization, well, they have enough time to do damage now. And I think whereas before you could have snuffed that stuff out by having a conversation with them and sitting down and talking to them. And that's just, it's not the same like sitting and talking to somebody on Zoom.
Yeah, well, I think there's the energy too that you sense. If you ever go to a concert or a sporting event, I'm a big soccer fan, and I always say like going to a football game is like a religious experience. Everybody's chanting together, everybody's cheering together, and there's energy that you don't really understand, but you sense it and you feel it and you're a part of it, and just being there. You can't describe it, but there's something going on, and I think that's just there's a lot of things about our reality and the nature of reality that we don't understand. Like I said, some of the people like Dr. Jack that you had on your podcast, and he's done some amazing interviews of late. He was on the Higher Side Chats, and I believe he was on Rick Rubin's podcast, and just really fascinating guy. But in regards to like he would talk about how morning sunlight affects the like literally every aspect of your health, how you digest food and all, like, and he's basically the he's arguing that diet isn't as like we like to look at health and nutrition go hand in hand. It's like, diet and nutrition is a huge part of what makes you healthy. He's arguing that like, no, there's some things that we don't quite understand, like the importance of morning light, sunlight, that is more important, is drastically more important than sunlight. So I think there's a lot of things we don't understand, and one of the things we don't understand is why human actual being in a room, real human interaction is so much better. Like I'm sure you've sensed it where like if you have a call with somebody or you have whatever a Zoom call with them or a phone call with them, it's not the same type of it almost seems like it's friendlier when it's in person, right? Like it's like
Yeah, well, because you also like, I don't know, like you do, like if you're on a Zoom call, you're there for the Zoom call, right? Like, and I think a lot of times, like in life, you have coffee with somebody, you play poker with somebody, you like there's things other than just that conversation. Does that make sense? Like, there's a table in front of you. There may be things on that table, like, maybe like the silverware is similar to what you had as a kid, and that comes up in conversation. Like, there's a lot of things that you don't experience that I think are a more richer and fuller experience. And I think when a lot of times when you're meeting up with somebody on Zoom, like the conversation is the only thing, right? Where I think as like if you meet with somebody in person, the conversation is part of the experience, right? Because I'm sure like, and this is going to sound a little woo woo, but you sit down with some people, you're like, dude, that person's energy is rough, right? Like you sit down with some of these people, you can actually feel them like kind of like I don't know, sucking your energy off just by being around them. Where on Zoom, you might not have that same feeling. Or like you may have some people that like just being around them like adds to the experience, right? Because of how they are as a person. Like there's so much you don't get online.
It's funny because people say that about Donald Trump, right? Have you heard that? Like he has this aura. Like so many
I've
people.
heard that. Like people just want to be around him.
Yeah, and there are people. I have people that I've met and in my personal life that are like that. Like every time that they come around, like the mood just changes. Like everybody's in a better mood. They just bring this positive energy. And
Or there's the opposite. Like you have that person that you know that's kind of like Eeyore, and like they spend some time with you, and it feels like they sucked a percentage of your soul while you were there. And then
well,
they tell you about their day, and like they
complain.
lost their car keys, and like something else happened to them, and something else happened to them, and something else happened to them. You're like, when is this going to be over? Like you get people like that in your life too.
Well, Jeremy, at our age, we filter those people out because we
Yeah, I filter them out really well at this point.
yeah. I'm the same. I tell people all the time, like the best thing you can do is anybody who brings negativity to your life, like slowly, when you're young and you have the time and energy, like, yeah, try to help them out. I get it. Like we're all like that. We have friends that it's like this person's a handful, but we're trying to get through to them. We're trying to help them get their lives together or whatever, deal with their issues. Or they're just like you said, always negative, but he's your friend, so you're always around. But it's like it gets to a point where it's like I can't save everybody anymore, and I don't have the time and energy to have people bring me down. And I want people to who bring me up, and not to say that you filter out everybody in your life that doesn't bring you some value in regards to positive energy, but you definitely you have to remove that from your life or it will bring it. And life's too short, man. And
Mhm.
when I'm as a parent like yourself, like I want to be the most positive, best person I can be when I'm around my kids. I want them to see the best version of me. And often life and work and stresses will just take that, opportunity away from you where like by the time you see your kids, you're burned out, you're tired, your tolerance and your um is very small and you just any little thing could tick you off and you're not yourself, you're not being the best version of you. And that's why I really put in like all this work and I also think this is why people another reason why people become more spiritual is because people I think our lifestyle in America is very it's like you said, it's like it's a culture-less society almost. And
Yes.
we've lost, and with culture comes community, and we've lost culture, we've lost community, and because of that we
But I
find
think we're seeing that like not just here, I think we're seeing it globally as well. Like and I think this is something that's been pushed as part of that kind of, UN agenda, right? Like you look at kind of and it's not to say immigration is a bad thing, but countries are getting flooded right now. Cultures are getting lost. And I think like if there's no reason to like go to Italy, then why would you go to Italy? You go there because you want to experience it. And I think it's a global problem we're seeing right now. We're seeing countries are losing culture, but I think like and I think there's kind of something a little bit more nefarious to that. I think it's the agenda to push us to kind of one global culture, um, which I think culture is something that makes us beautiful, right? Like there's things you go to different parts of the world to experience, and I think um, it's not something you can get at every place. But I think yeah, we're experiencing it here, but I think we're experiencing globally too.
yeah, no, I agree. And I think COVID helped a lot with that because when you look at prior to COVID, a lot of little mom pop shops were popping up all over the place. They're getting really popular. And each state, each town, each city had its own feel and had its own type of food and people. And COVID really, killed a lot of that. And, basically now everything's dominated by, similar restaurants and fast food joints and coffee shops and whatnot. And no, cities don't and states don't really seem to have their own flavor and their own identity like they used to. And we're going in that direction. And like you said, I don't think it's accidental.
Sure.
I eventually, they want to track and control everybody on the planet. Digital currency. So and then that way they know how much you're making, how much you're spending, where you're making it, where you're spending it, and have complete control of our everyday living. These smart cities that was also conspiratorial, and now you're seeing more and more articles pop up about them. It's getting to, and this is where like technology can we can either use it to to save us to some extent and connect us with other like-minded people and use it to learn, or it can enslave us. And
Yes.
do you have some thoughts on that? Which direction do you think it's taken us?
Well, I think like even like people go nuts about AI, and I think like if you can figure out how to use different AI tools to be more efficient, then you can create a better product and have more time with your family and things like that as well. I think anything in excess has the ability to be detrimental. I think, often, and it's not true with everything, right? Like there are certain things you shouldn't do in moderation, but I think most things in moderation are fine. But I think what happens is we tend to go so deep down the rabbit hole of like needing a thing, like customer service, for example, right? Companies have tried to save so much money on customer service that I can't talk to a human being to help me solve my problem that is very unique and I can only explain to a human being. So I think like we need to figure out how to use things to be more efficient and be better at them. But I think we can't lose what makes us human. And I think oftentimes we lose, we're companies and people are trying to take out of things what makes them human. And I think that's why there's so much of a demand for conversations like this and podcasting and thing. People want a human connection and they feel like it's being taken from them. And I think that's where the direction we're going.
Well, and then the wisdom of crowds, right? This whole idea of like together we're smarter, we're wiser, we can share information, we can share perspectives and opinions. And like you said, like throughout history, the greatest thinkers debated with one another. The greatest
Yeah.
philosophers debated with one another, and that's how they came out with their ideas. They filtered out the bad ideas, debated the good ideas, and when you
Well, and debate was also different too. Like I think people debated to really have an iron sharpens iron idea. I think with where we're at debate now, like people actually hate the people they're debating. And I think like that's not cool either. Like we need more like friendly debates, like things where we're trying to get a better idea.
Yeah, like sometimes on this show and other shows, I'll push back a little bit, and I don't,
Sure.
I'm always a little hesitant to do so because I'm like, I hope they don't take it the wrong way. Like I'm
Same way as a host. It's like you kind of like want you're like, oh, this is my platform, and I feel like I don't want to make somebody uncomfortable.
exactly, yeah, it's always such a hard balancing act because it's like in a way it's like I want to push back not because I'm trying to be a jerk, but I really want to better understand why they think this certain way. And I'm not trying to spark a debate or argument, I should say, but I want to debate a little bit because I want my ideas challenged and I want to challenge somebody else's ideas and hope that we can better understand each other and maybe even realize that like maybe I'm wrong about something. And so but it's something that people don't do. Like you said, they don't push back too much because it's like too many people have these like they're not having a discussion because they want to explore ideas. They're having discussion because they want you to digest their ideas, right?
Yes.
It's like here, these are my ideas, and I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. And that's why anybody who's ever too sure of themselves, like makes me a little nervous. I'm just like, oh, this guy might be full of shit. It's like anybody who like you were talking about how when you first started your podcast, a lot of the motivational speakers and those type of go-getter type guys, like they all give me like a car salesman type of feel. I'm just like, you're just, like a lot of times when you're so certain of your ideas and your methods and this is the secret to this and that's the
Well, I think certainty isn't a bad thing. Like it's good to be certain because I think to a certain extent that shows competence. But I think like, and I've done this a couple of times in this conversation. You'll be like, oh, well, what do you think about blah blah? I'll be like, I'm sorry, I don't know anything about that. And I think that humility is something we need to have more is when we actually don't know something. I think admit it, man. I think like competence and certainty is fine. But I think to be always be certain about everything, like that is a little strange. Like you should be willing to like if you don't know something, you don't know something. I think it makes people trust what you actually do know more if you admit what you don't know.
Yeah, well, too often people will use that to try to win a debate, right? It's like, have you even read this? Blah, blah, blah. No, I'm not familiar with it. See, you don't even know what this is. It's like that type of thing where it's like you use it as a tool to win a debate. But that goes back to what you're saying. The motivation behind debates today have been just to try to win a debate. It's not about trying to, like you said, iron sharpen iron, steel sharpen steel, whatever the
It
metaphor is.
feels like every conversation is like shit posting now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like your goal is to be like, all right, I've owned you.
Yeah, no, it's almost like the religious versus atheist debates back in the day with, Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Rabbi crazy guy who has now been on the news a lot because of Kansas Owens. He used to debate Christopher Hitchens back in the day, the crazy rabbi who's going at it with Candace Owens. And
I haven't followed that debate much. Like I've seen some stuff pop up on Twitter, but I just haven't been as interested in it.
oh, he's a crazy person. I can't. He's like the Alex Jones of rabbis, in regards to like just
Alex Jones is coming out to look like more right though in the modern age, which is kind of strange.
Well, yeah, you're right. That was a metaphor you could use like years ago when he was just when
He's
people.
kind of like reverse conspiracy himself.
Yeah. Well, I think he always you're on. I mean, we both host podcasts. Like if you did 3-4 hours a day, okay, most of the time by yourself, and you're just reading headlines, and you're literally going down every rabbit hole of the darkest things that and scariest, evilest things going on in the world all the time, you're gonna have moments of crazy, right? You're gonna have moments where you're just like losing your mind. And he also Alex Jones is actually really funny. Like he has a great sense of humor. He'll make fun of himself sometimes. And and it's yeah, so it's funny. The reason why I say the rabbis, the Alex, because the most extreme versions of Alex Jones, that's what the rabbi is all the time. He it's not a good look. But those debates back in the day were always like, I'm here to defend my team, you're here to defend your team. We never like admit, one thing that is a red flag immediately for me is when somebody makes a good point in a debate and then the other person dismisses it or tries to just ignore it and move on to their point. And I'm just like, no, but that was a really valid point. Like you're not even like if I'm talking to somebody and somebody says something that I haven't, they said something that I haven't really thought about. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that, or I'd never even looked at it in that way. Like if you're
Well, like here, so I mentioned like I'd studied in England, so it was actually I studied it at Oxford for a bit, and like Oxfordshire is actually like the town where a lot of like people hear of Oxford University. I think like it's like a school. It's actually a collection of a bunch of schools, and but like in Oxfordshire, there's this bar called the Eagle and Child, and the Eagle and Child is like this really famous bar where C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, J.R.R. Tolkien, and guys like that used to go and drink together and debate. And I think that's the difference is a lot of times like these debates, like they were drinking clubs for those guys. Like the people debating each other now, I can tell you right now, they're not even eating a snack together, much less a drinking club. So I think we've also lost that like, friendly nature of it of like, you know, you're right, you're wrong, whatever. But like, we're also here hanging out and sharing a drink together.
well, there's no pub culture anymore, right? There's no
Yeah.
that's a huge thing. I think alcohol for some people, of course, I know a lot of clean people that will say that they're much happier without any substances in their lives. But um, it's been a social lubricant for myself. I've had some of my best discussions and friendly debates with friends over a drink and a cigar, and you're arguing about what's going on in the world, and you feel like in that moment or in those couple hours or in that night, you're figuring out the world's issues. You're like, you're resolving things. And
There's camaraderie to it, right?
yeah, and people used to be able to do that, right? I mean, that's kind of the difference. And I've heard from people much older than us talk about this, how they used to grow up. When they were growing up, you could have friends that had completely different ideologies. You could be have a friend that's a hardcore Christian, a Muslim friend, a Republican friend, a Democrat friend. You could have all different, they could all hang out, and it didn't, not every time they hung out did they want to kill each other, and today, like, they wouldn't even hang out, they just see each other as the enemy. And I think that's a part of the game that's being played too, is like this whole divide and conquer. It's like
Correct.
as long as we keep focusing our attention and energy on each other and considering our neighbor as the enemy, the people who are really ruining our lives get a pass.
No, I think that's brilliant because it's once again it goes back to Marxist ideology, right? I think if you create groups, whether they're real or imagined, and have those groups, in a struggle against each other, you can kind of do whatever you want because they're busy fighting each other.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. So I've taken up a lot of your time, and it has been a super fun conversation. But I know you're a busy man. what let people know a little bit about your company, just in case people who might be interested in those services are listening. Also, your podcasts, all the platforms that your podcasts are on, and then also any upcoming guests or past guests that you think are really good episodes to look out for.
Yeah, so my company again is Command Your Brand, and we help clients to appear on the right podcast and have conversations just like this one because I'm a big believer in that. To quote Adam Curry here, that podcasts are the last bastion of free speech, and I think like a lot of the conversations that need to be had, like this one, can't be had in 2 minutes or 30 seconds or a clip or not had at all, right? Like I think big conversations need to be had, and that's what we help people to do. And actually wrote a book about it as well that people can get over at bestpodcastbook.com. And that really will help you figure out like, how can I use the podcast world to create some more motion, to have bigger conversations. So that's our company, Command Your Brand. My podcast, still on YouTube at the moment. I guess we'll see what happens. I'm also on Rumble. It's called the Jeremy Ryan Slate Program. And since 2014, we've been having conversations that, we try to look at like, what are the cultural things we need to know? Sure, we get into some political topics because you can't avoid it, but like, how do we preserve culture? What are the things we need to know? And we also go into a lot of those rabbit holes. Like I like, we've had Roger Stone on a few times talking about the JFK assassination. We've had, conversations with I'm sorry, General Michael Flynn about, the deep state and what does it look like and how does it actually function. We've had Patrick Byrne on talking about election fraud and how does it work with technology. So we're having a lot of big conversations because I want to give people the ability to have some information, think a little bit differently, and really take responsibility for culture themselves.
Yeah, I've had Roger on a few times myself, and I know some people aren't a fan of his, but like I always tell people, anytime you can get somebody from the inside who's been, that close to, the people in power, eh, you can extract something, some wisdom, some
Yeah.
information from them. And I've had Jack Abramoff on before. It's similar type thing where people are like, "Why are you having Jack Abramoff on?" I'm like, because I mean, this guy was one of the most powerful lobbyists of his time. He understands how to manipulate politicians, how things really work in government. And I'm like, and if you can give us some insight, why not take advantage of that? And I think that goes back to what you were saying, like just this uh this obsession with only talking to people that you agree with and considering anybody else as the enemy instead of trying to learn from everybody, which I think is what we should be doing. And I think that your podcast is definitely doing that. I can't thank you enough for coming on and taking so much time out of your day to chat. Hopefully we stay in touch, and hopefully I will get, if interested, I'll throw you an invite for the next Union of the Unwanted if you'd like to join that.
Yeah, let me know, man. I'd love to. I've started checking out the show, so I'd love to.
Yeah, yeah, that shows it's very similar to what we talked about. Like just trying to bring people from different backgrounds. And we have tons of friendly debates on there. We have we'll bring I remember what was it like uh one of the episodes where Mel K, I don't know if you're familiar with Mel
Yeah,
K.
yeah, yeah. I know Mel.
Yeah, so Mel before her show really hit it off, like her and Sam were friends, and then she started doing our shows, and then her show really, she's doing amazing work now. But I remember having her on with like Greg Palast, and it was just happened to be like I'm the one who does the invites, and I just started invite, I'm just like, I'm like, let me mix this person with that person. I like to mix, like, I don't want an echo chamber, right? You don't want like 20 people that all are agreeing with one another. You want some curveballs in there and people who might push back or whatever. And I remember that episode was like just, but that's what we're trying to
But
create.
it goes back to what you said, man. Like iron sharpens iron, we get better ideas. And I think if we can do it from a friendly perspective without like trying to slam dunk on somebody, I think that's how we get someplace.
Do you ever have people on that you disagree with, but you're like, what, I actually want to explore our disagreements?
I haven't done that. I've had a lot of people so there's people that are like I don't ideologically agree with, but they're the best experts on like certain things, and I want to talk to them. So like somebody I admire her work a lot, but I know politically we don't agree on things. Is Jen Briney, who does a podcast called The
Right.
Congressional Dish. It is one of the best podcasts on like fully understanding Congress and how it works and things like that. We don't agree on a lot of things ideologically, but she did an incredible episode on the Maidan coup of 2014 with me on my show. So like I haven't had a lot of things like that, because people come to my show for like education about topics and not really debate, I guess. But so like, even the latest episode we did was like just about Congress in general and how does it work. So it's, to me, that's a lot of what people are coming to, is to actually get educated on a topic. I'm not opposed to the idea of debate. It's just kind of what I'm looking at, what my audience has been asking for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've had Jen Brimey on too. Yeah,
Jen's incredible. She's brilliant.
yeah. She does a lot of work that most of us aren't willing to do for us. So yeah,
To listen to all those congressional hearings for hours, is pretty awesome.
yeah, and it's very unique. There's nobody else, I think, doing a show like that and really breaking down what's in these bills and whatnot. Just about every time she's been on my show, I think we also debated if voting mattered, because we would tend to disagree on that a little bit. But but that's kind of, again, like, because you disagree, you shouldn't agree with
Well, I
anybody.
think what happens is people say like, I don't like this person or I don't agree with this person, so everything they say is wrong. And I think that's insane, right? Like I think you should be able to look at somebody for, okay, we don't agree on this topic, but wow, they're really smart and really good at this thing. Let's talk about that thing.
Yeah, I remember when COVID happened, my brother's like, hey, he just, because we would debate a lot about what was going on, and he's like, oh, even Rogan thinks COVID's a big deal. He had this doctor on. It was one of the early doctors he had on that was, helped spread the fear of the COVID scam. But I'm just
Oh,
like,
Dr. Michael, whatever his name is there. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. And and I'm like, dude, I don't agree with anybody all the time. And I can still, admire somebody's opinions on certain things and then disagree with them on other things. I'm like, that's complete okay. I've had Professor Richard Wolff on my show, and I'm constantly having libertarians on and anarcho-libertarians on and whatnot. And but I'm like, hey, he's a completely opposite direction thinking type of guy. I'm like, I want to learn more about his perspective on Karl Marx, and instead of just hearing somebody else's opinion on it, on Dr. Professor Richard Wolff, I'm like, let me hear it right from his mouth and what's his opinion, and really talk about those things. So like, to me, it's
Well,
like,
I don't know where to put myself, frankly. Like conservatives don't think I'm conservative enough, and liberals don't think I'm liberal enough. So I'm somewhere.
you're, you're politically homeless, like most.
Exactly.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And that's okay too. That means you're a free thinker and you don't plant your flag.
There's a guy, Andrew Heaton. He does a podcast called The Political Orphanage, and it's like that's kind of where I feel like I live, the political orphanage.
Oh, I like that out. Well, hey, thanks, Jeremy. I'll send you links to the show once it's up and live. Enjoy the rest of your day. And like I said, we'll keep in touch and hopefully have you on in a future show.
Sounds great, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeremy. Take care.